Hello everybody and welcome to another episode of What If RuneScape, the video series where we take an idea and stretch it out as far as it can possibly go. Today we're going to be talking about spellbooks. We have 4 different spellbooks in OSRS, and at 99 magic you're able to flip between them almost freely with the magic cape. There is still a little bit of a time gate involved in that, but I'm almost just suggesting, what if we took that away? What would it be like if you could use all 4 spellbooks at once? Because we all know there's a lot of spells you're not going to switch a spellbook for just to be able to use. But if it was at a quick access just to be able to get to it, you might end up using a few of these spells a lot more often. Okay, so I kind of want to look at this from square one. We have a spellbook. Okay, cool. It's not an item in our inventory, so we can't really mess with it. But we can go to different locations all across Gielinor and change spellbooks. Apparently, adding pages to that spellbook isn't an option. And apparently, having both spellbooks at the same time in your inventory wouldn't be a fair option either. I'm not 100% sure if these have been explained away past these magics don't play well with each other. But what if they did? So let's go into it. What would it look like if you could flip between 4 different spellbooks? Or, even better, what would it look like if the spellbooks were rearranged to be a little bit more cohesive with the theme? If we had 4 different spellbooks, but they were broken down into combat spells, buff and debuff spells, along with summons, our utility spells, and then teleport spells. So let's just look at the spellbook page for a minute. We've got the 4 spellbooks at the top, something you would be able to flip between easily. You may even be able to assign these 2 number keys like 1, 2, 3, and 4 to be able to swap through them quickly. This would likely only be unlocked at 99 magic, but I'm definitely not against bringing this into the game sooner than that. I'm sure you could unlock all 4 spellbooks and then get this to happen, but that might be a little bit overpowered. Who knows? A new meta will emerge and it will likely be worse than range. So let's just go over the utilities for a minute. And I'm kind of gonna be going down the line, but a lot of these spells are a little bit of the same, so you will be able to get the gist. You're gonna find things like high alchemy and your enchanting spells. Things like making fire orbs, all of the different types of reanimation, humidify, spin flax. You've got a good list of your lunar spells, like magic imbue, fertile soil, plant make, recharge dragonstone, stat spy, monster examine, and so many more. All of these are utility spells at their core, and it's often seen as an inconvenience to swap your spellbook to use any of these, to be absolutely honest. There are a couple of outliers like NPC contact. People do swap their spellbook specifically for that one, but there's a good amount of these utility spells that go to waste, like degrime and resurrect crops. A lot more people should be using those during farm runs, but they're just on the standard spellbook, so they're not gonna do it. I'll tell you, the most ironic thing about the utility spellbook is almost all of these spells are thrown by the wayside and would go to waste. But if you put all of them together on one spellbook page, this would be the default spellbook page that almost everybody would stay on. Next up, let's go ahead and look at the teleports. And this one's actually super easy. This already exists at your player-owned house. This wouldn't be changing anything about the game. It would just be slightly easier for you to access it. And yes, it is a lot more expensive at your player-owned house, but you do have to realize you're not gonna have all of these runes on you at the same time. You're gonna gear up for what you're doing regularly most of the time, except you might include another rune or 2 if we had this type of setup. All of a sudden, clue scrolls become so much easier, or at least a little bit. And maybe, just maybe, we can start moving away from having to show up to your player-owned house every 30 seconds to hit a teleport, a restoration pool, or your jewelry box. But I can really only imagine the utility that you're able to find out of all of these teleport spells being able to get around. And that's always been a complaint for people, trying to get around the goddamn map of RuneScape. And now let's move on to the combat spells. I've divided the combat spells and the buff and debuff spells. They're essentially the 2 books that you're likely going to be flipping between when you're in combat. and I don't really think there should be a penalty for that. You should want to be able to summon your thralls, you should want to be able to weaken your enemy, and you should want to be able to bind them as well. None of these things should be off limits to somebody, and it would really only make combat utility soar as high as it could possibly go. Not to mention, if you are looking at just the combat spellbook, a lot of these spells aren't going to be chosen outright when you're looking at the Arceus spellbook. But these Demon Bane spells, in a lot of situations, would be better than just blasting it with your good old Flyer Blast, or even just being able to have Vengeance so close to your other combat abilities. Truthfully, just being able to switch through so many different combat abilities at once would likely make it a little bit easier for bosses in the future to have more mechanics to be utilized. And going back to the buff and debuff spells for a minute, I'm pretty sure none of you ever realized we actually have buff spells. You can boost the effects of potions or even share the potion effect. There's things like energy transfer or even cure other, but none of those things truly get utilized in high level play because they're outplayed by something else. Something that I think would be really great when we look at the buff and debuff spells, it's got the summons on it, because where else would that go? It is essentially a buff to combat. But what if you wanted to curse your enemy, summon a thrall, and then dark lure him to you, and then somebody across the way wants to dark lure the enemy to them? You just toss them back and forth. Or maybe one has a bind, one has a lure, because one really doesn't want to get hit. Hardcore Iron Man. Either way, there's lots of different ways that you could make this work. But I assure you, you'll never have a magical technique emerge on the fly with our old system. All of these spellbooks shouldn't be competing with each other, they should be complementing each other. And nothing truly outlines this more than the fact that magic is competing with itself while it's also competing with range, and it's also competing with melee. It might as well be the same thing as shooting yourself in the foot when you start a 100-yard run. And I'm probably going to have a lot of comments that say things like, oh, this is going to break so much. But does it? If you get access to all 4 spellbooks at 99 magic, that's the same thing as what happens now. You just have to have your magic cape with you. I'm just saying maybe we don't need the magic cape. But if we were gonna get rid of the utility for the magic cape, what would you want the benefit for the magic cape to be? Go ahead and leave that down below, because I really have no idea. But as it stands now, magic is complicated, and I feel like this would help to make it a lot less complicated. But at the same time, for those who really want to get into it, it would be so much more complicated, and there'd be so many new metas to be able to evolve out of the magic than just, you know, staff go burr. But that's my idea for a spellbook change. What do you guys think? Would this completely break the game of OSRS? I don't think so, but leave it down in the comments. But for me, everybody, that's going to be it today. If you do like these videos, make sure to leave in the comments what you would like to see next. We've been making a bunch of NPCs, or if you think something needs to be added to the game of RuneScape, leave it down below. Theory crafting is one of my favorite ideas to do for this game, and until next time, everybody, I will see you all later.